And so you can see here, I've gone ahead and I've filled in some of this for us. So we have A, B, C, D, and E. First 5 letters of the musical alphabet. Notice that it went from the second space in the treble clef down to the bottom space in the bass clef. And same thing for the third line for B, down to the second line, and so on, going right up, as we've mentioned. So now we can fill in the rest. So if E is the third space, that means the fourth line, the next line above it, would have to be the next letter in the alphabet, which is F. So there we go. And from here we can go next letter in the alphabet after F. If F is a line, that means that G is a space, which is interesting because if we look back at our treble clef, G would sit on top in its own little space atop the fifth line of our staff. It was actually leaving the staff. But now it moves down. Instead of being a space above the staff, it's a space in the staff. Now it's a top space, which means that the next letter would have to recycle back to the beginning of our alphabet. If G is a space, the next letter would have to be a line, which of course we don't go to H, we go back to A. So from here, we've now kind of capped out. Now, you may notice something here. Some people may say, well, why did he write this so close to everything he had from the treble clef? Well, hopefully you see now. If A is a line, the next letter, B, would be a space. And you can see here, B is kind of in its own space. This line is atop of it. Remember we talked about going lower than the middle C when we played Sakura? Well, there you go. So now, if we were to just keep going, F, G, A, B, C, D, and now A, we just keep the alphabet going. Now we're into treble clef range. These actually connect. All right, remember, when we play keyboard, it's not like there's two keyboards, one for our left hand, one for our right hand. There is a space in between that where they eventually will, the alphabet will just keep going. And that's what we see here in this range right here, which we're not going to focus on too much because if we did, we'd have to play in another clef that looks like this, which is totally the horror show for most musicians, even pros, like people who do it a lot like me. Now, let's keep going down here. If A is the bottom space, we kind of forgot about talking about the bottom line. When we did treble clef, you may remember we started on E here. Instead, remember, everything moves down a line. So G was the second line in treble clef, which means it's now the bottom line right here in bass clef. So F and E, they would end up being below the staff, which if we need it later, we'll get to later on, which we probably will. But for right now, we're just going to leave it at this. So really focus in, my friends, on just this for now, okay? This is what we're going to start off with just to get ourselves going in bass clef, just this right here. Now, of course, if we're going to go ahead and use this, well, we're not going to be using our right hand anymore because our right hand was for treble clef. So we're going to have to go ahead and make ourselves a little bit of a cheat sheet so we can use these pitches in our left hand for bass clef. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, of course, you may remember when we did Sakura to Sakura here, every part of this song, I only included the treble clef parts. You can kind of see here, I actually cut off where the bass clef was. So we're not going to be using our right hand like this anymore. So instead, we're going to go ahead and use our left hand, A. So I just went ahead here and I just traced my left hand, all right? This may be tricky. You may need to have a friend help trace it out. But if you're a lefty like me, you may have been looking forward to finally being able to use your left hand for some music. Now, remember before, when we did Sakura Sakura, we did, of course, focus on the right hand. So we put the treble clef and wrote right hand. So we're going to do the same thing here, but we're not going to put the treble clef. Remember, we are using our left hand. So instead, we're going to draw the bass clef. Remember the dot, half a heart, dot, dot. And just like that we have our hand labeled. Now, of course, you may remember that before we said that our thumb is finger 1 and our pinky is finger 5. And it went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, we're going to keep those same numbers, but of course, it's not going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 anymore because if our thumb is finger number 1 and our pinky is finger number 5, it'll now say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 instead. Now, of course, we know this, but where are we going to put our hand on the keyboard? Because from by there, we can figure out what letters to fill in. Now, that question, as you may have started to realize when we did Sakura, originally when we did our hand on Mary Had a Little Lamb, it stayed in one position. But of course, on Sakura, it moved around. So it's really going to depend on what song we're on. So let's take a look at what we're going to work on today. Okay, so for our song today, we're going to go ahead and we're going to learn Good King Wenceslas. Now, of course, first thing we want to realize that we are indeed in bass clef here, my friends. So as we go through this piece, I really want to think about it in two halves. First thing we can notice here, it has 1, 2, 3, 4 measures separated by these bar lines, these little blocks between the lines. 4 measures, okay? We can also see that there's only two types of rhythm that we use, just the quarter note and half note rhythms, which of course we should hopefully still be familiar with from our conversation about rhythm back many weeks ago. Now, to think about this as we learn this song, I like to think about this in halves. Like I said, so we have the first two measures and the second two measures. So what I've done is I've just gone ahead and I've made another posting of them down here. So this right here will be the measure 1 and measure 2, which are right here. And then, of course, we have measure 3 and measure 4. So this right here is measure 3. I've posted that right here. And these half notes right here, measure 4. So as we go through this today, I will be referring to each one of these measures by a number. That's what they are. Okay, so as we take a look here at measure 1, the first 3 pitches are all the same pitch. Now, they are all in the 1, 2, 3, 4th space up between the 4th and 5th lines. Now, if we were back in the treble clef, we may remember that the 1, 2, 3, 4th space up was F, A, C, E. But we're not in treble clef. Remember, we are in bass clef, my friends. So now we have to take a look and consider bass clef. Everything from treble clef moves down one line or one space. So what used to be E is now A, C, E, G, right here. So the top space in bass clef is G. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to label the first 3 pitches as G. Now to finish off this first measure, we have one more pitch, but it is not on G. In fact, it does have a line going through it. The top line, the 5th line up. Now in bass clef, if we come back over and take a look, that is A. So right there, top line going through it is A, because of course, if G has a space, the next line after it is the next letter in the musical alphabet, which of course is G going back to A. So we can go ahead and we will label this pitch right here as A. As we look at measure 2 here, it starts off similarly. We have 2 G's followed by a half note. Now, this half note does look like it's partially filled in because there's a line going through it. It is the 1, 2, 3, 3rd line up in our bass clef staff. So if we were to take a look down here, our bass clef 3rd line up, 1, 2, 3. The 3rd line goes through the pitch D. So this, of course, would be a half note, 2 beats on the pitch D. So now we can see that the first 2 measures are filled in. We have G, 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 A, G, G, D. Let's move on to measure 3. Measure 3 obviously does have a bit more movement here. We have 4 different quarter notes all on changing pitches. The first one is, of course, in a space here. It is the 1, 2, 3, 3rd space up, which is 1, 2, 3, E. All right? Remember, E was the top space in treble clef, but because we move it down, it goes down to the 3rd space now. Boom, in bass clef, E. We should recognize this right here, the 3rd line going through it. We saw this before, measure 2. 3rd line up, there's D. Remember, the line below the space of E is going to be D. 3rd note in the measure here, of course, is again E. We went right back to it from space down to the line, back to the same space. Now this next one. This is going to be an F. F, of course, is the 4th line of the staff. 1, 2, 3, 4. We know we have D is a line, E is a space, F is a line. Go right up the alphabet. A, B, C, D, E, F. Line, space, line. Which leads us up to a space. Line, space, D, E, F, back to G, my friends. Hopefully we're used to seeing the top space of the bass clef staff being G. So all we use in this song are G, A, D, E, and F. So that's all we're going to need. But right when you think we're all good, there's something that we need to talk about. Something we're going to be talking about in coming weeks. I'm just going to introduce us to it now. Now, when we look at the keyboard, of course, we're used to just kind of focusing on the white keys. We really haven't been using the black keys for much of anything. Well, today we're going to need to use one of the black keys. If we take a look here, right at the beginning of this staff, right next to our clef, we have a little number sign. Now, this number sign is not what we're going to call a number sign in music. It looks like a number sign, but in music, this little number sign is what we call a sharp sign. Now, what the heck does sharp mean? I mean, like, are we talking about like the leading edge of a pair of scissors? No, we're not talking about sharp as in something that's going to cut you. We're talking about something that's actually going to make a pitch slightly higher. So what pitch is going to be slightly higher? Which pitch are we going to be using a black key for? Well, let's take a look where this particular sharp sign is. If you take a very close look here, it might be kind of hard for some of us to see. The sharp sign has the 4th line of the staff going directly through it. 4th line up is F. That means that F is going to be what we call a sharp. So this is not just going to be F. We're going to be playing F sharp, which when we get over to the keyboard, I will show you where F sharp is. Don't worry, it's not very far from F. It's the black key that touches F. We'll talk about that when we get over to the keyboard. All right, guys, again, we're running out of time here, so I will see you guys again for part 3 here in a little bit. Bye.